Righto. Cool, thank you for that. Well, kia ora. Now, I've got a bit of an echo happening. Can we resolve the echo? Has it stopped? All right. Haere mai, tina katou ana o te tanga o te wā. Kia tai mai ki te tau toko te kaupapa o te rā. Nō reira, tina rā katou katoa. So greetings, welcome, and we'll immerse ourselves in the business of the day of strategy and policy. We have one apology from Councillor Mager. Are there any other apologies?
I'll move the apologies accepted.
Thank you. Move Nicol, seconded. Lloyd, McCallum. No discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour would say aye. Are there any declarations of interest? Haven't been made aware of any, so we'll move to item 4, public forum. Petitions, deputations. Again, I haven't been advised of any. So we'll go to the minutes. Would someone like to move that the minutes be adopted as an accurate record of the meeting of the 30th of March? Someone like to move? Thank you, David. Seconder, Alan. So their accuracy and completeness is open for discussion. Are there any errors or omissions that we'd like to be alerted to? If not, would someone? Oh, we've got the motion, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour that we adopt the minutes would say aye. Aye. Those against say no. That's agreed. Those people online, I've got you. If you want to make a contribution, use your little hands, and if I miss you, it will be by accident, not by intent. So I could just alert councillors to advise me if I am missing any signals from those that are attending by Zoom. So notification of extraordinary or urgent business, supplementary reports. Do we have any?
Yeah,
yep.
It's probably not the right meeting, but I think and some of us went last night to the NZ, New Zealand Aluminium Smelter community meeting, and they I think they did it very well. It was very simple, done very well. Good question from the community, and I think it's we just need to keep the communication going and understand the public questions that are coming through as this thing evolves over time. So very frank, open and honest, I think, would be the feedback I would give about where they are and where they are. So,
and did they give any indication about their expectations, or
they would like to carry on, but subject to fair agreements being put in place, and they are getting very close to actually starting that process. But they, because of my understanding, is because of markets and stuff, they have to officially announce and then go quiet as they have that dialogue. They're not quite there yet.
Yep. Okay, Peter.
Mr. Chairman, I just asked Councillor McCallum, was there any indication, talk of from the floor about the community and the roller coaster the community continually go through with over the years of opening, shutting, or opening? Was there any talk of that as opposed to just the commercial nature of the business?
Sorry, that's me.
Just while we are sorting out that echo, I just acknowledge Anne Wakefield coming in, and thank you for your little explanation of the tech difficulties. We've only just begun the meeting, so you're welcome. We're on item 6. We're just talking about reports, so welcome in, Anne.
A number of us went to that meeting last night, and a lot of those were covered questions basically about the mishandling of the last few years, but also the ongoing uncertainty for the workforce in the community. Yeah. Certainly a change of attitude, obviously as a regulator we're doing our own work, but they are certainly bending over backwards to improve their image and the strong indications they wish to say, even to the stage that they believe that initiatives like hydrogen and
databases can all work in that environment. So it's a watch that space. The negotiations, I believe, have not started yet, but it is certainly a different attitude that we saw 2 or 3 years ago. So.
In another role I have as independent chair of Marihiku region, I'd have to say there are 3 players here, and they're not all on the same page at this stage. The government has some expectations, Meridian has some expectations, and the smelter has some expectations. So there's quite a bit of work to get them all aligned at this stage, I would say. But I think the encouraging thing from each party is that the very point that you just made, Nicol, that there is room for other initiatives to be developed alongside their operation, and maybe even be part of their operation. So there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, but there is quite some separation between the 3 parties at this stage, in my view. Peter, you were making a comment that got interrupted by some...
No, Mr. Chairman, it's been answered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions in relation to that? Any other reports? Move to item 7, questions. Were there any questions? None have been registered with me. Right. Chairman and Councillor reports.
Just a brief report. We've finally been able to start having our community engagement meetings again, and Peter and I attended one at Fairfax in the last couple of weeks. A good turnout, quite a few questions, and people just sort of wanting to know where things are going. Also attended the Federated Farmers conference and question and answer session there. I think it seemed to go down reasonably well. There's certainly, you realise there is a bit of a gap in the understanding of what we're actually doing, and as we've said in the past, communication is going to be very important as we move forward. And I guess the dangers of confusion between the multiple things we're trying to do at the moment, we've got to be very careful about. But certainly a lot of interest, and those audiences I found on the whole have been pretty positive, and but certainly wanting to know what's coming up.
Councillor Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a question for Councillor Horrell. With regard to various communities that you've been to, Nicol, and good on you for going to those, are you finding that there are some characters that turn up at more than one meeting? What I mean is people who come from out of that particular area in order to have a presence. And I'm thinking more particularly of Federated Farmers executive, perhaps.
Not so much sure out of their regions, but you've certainly got some people who ask the same questions at most of those meetings. But when you actually respond, the body language around the room, even Federated Farmers Conference, I felt were understood or reasonably comfortable with the direction he is travelling in.
Peter.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to back that up, Nicol, too, about that gap. Even some of the most basic things that we talk about in this chamber, and we talked about at that meeting in particular, Nicol, and now we've got the RPS, the regional policy statement, to add in there another layer, and I'm concerned about that gap. But Robert, to your question, no, I haven't seen anyone travelling outside their area to ask the hard questions. So no, it's all been pretty good and well received.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions of that report or any other reports? Let's move to item 1, approvals required. So Lucy, you've got an explanation here?
Thank you, Chair.
Talk to us, thank you.
Vicky Follow, the Senior Policy Planner, is online to talk to this item. So,
Right.
hopefully,
Beaming in, Vicky?
Vicky is beaming in.
Yeah. Got no picture and no sound, Vicky. Can you deal to that?
having technical issues, I'm happy to do.
We'll just give it 2 ticks.
Oh, tech
Up the
issues.
issues, sorry. Yeah, back to you, Lucy.
That's fine, that's absolutely fine. So through you, Chair, and thank you. The item relates to the insertion of freshwater visions into the Southland Regional Policy Statement. We've had a number of conversations with Council and with iwi on this matter, and this item is to progress that and take those drafts out to the community for consultation. There is obviously a suite of other information that we're going to be sharing as part of the campaign, and Adrian is here as well to answer any questions that you may have regarding the wider comms around this item. However, just to note, there are future steps that will need to be taken to alter the regional policy statement in terms of the freshwater chapter itself, but we will bring further information to this committee on those. At this point, we're just tabling the objectives and draft visions so that we can start to have conversations with the community. Worth noting as well that at the last council meeting, this committee was delegated the responsibility to go out to clause 3 consultation for these matters as per the Resource Management Act requirements.
Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, any questions, Lloyd?
Yeah, I just read the terminology, like on page 16, like the Rio FMU, it says waters of coastal catchments east and west of Tiwaiwai Lagoon. Well, every catchment in the world is either east or west of Tiwaiwai Lagoon. I'm just wondering about having some marker points, like say between Pusica Point and Pahi, and any water sort of discharging there, including the actual catchment, because it misses out a few. But I just wondered if you had a few geographical markers that separate along the coast where those FMUs sort of apply to.
A bit more defined, I think that's what you're asking.
A little bit vague, but I just thought just a few definite points, like Nugget Point or Upper Point or something like that. Yeah.
So through you, Chair, so the FMU boundary is defined within the water plan currently, which would apply to, this is the same boundaries, so they are already delineated within the water plan. One of the challenges drafting visions of this kind is that the water plan's already slightly further ahead than where the RPS is, and so the need for the visions to refer to information in other places, that's one of those key points that's, I can understand your concern though, Councillor, in terms of the vagueness of the vagueness though of the wording in terms of that both east and west.
Norma, have you got
I think
more
perhaps
elucidation on the matter?
I'm just considering, Lucy, whether the confusion is that it says coastal catchments with an S when you actually mean a coastal catchment. And I'm assuming that's what it does mean.
Yes, it does, yes.
That will refer back to that one catchment.
Nicole?
And I guess it's our FMU definition is that it finishes basically where it meets the sea, so it includes the estuaries. And coming from that area, I know we've got a lagoon on one side, but you've also got quite a large area on the other side before to where it actually opens. So the mouth has moved probably further west over the last few years. So I'm assuming that's why because you've got the old lagoon that's been for a very long time, which is not in great shape, principally because of the water flow that it now gets. But over the last probably decade, we've seen the mouth move further to the west. So you've got two quite large water bodies before it actually hits the sea.
I have a mechanical question. Number 7 on page 14 says the council approval is now sought to consult on the draft position. You just run me through how that consultation process is actually going to work, how are we going to do that, what are our expectations and how are we going to do that?
I can speak to that, and then I might nod to Adrian if it's further communication or engagement back up. But in terms of the process, the timetable for how and when we would undertake that consultation, there'll be an element of wide public consultation, which is likely to start hopefully this week. I'm looking at Adrian for end of the week.
The
the know your why wider process conversation. The specifics on the visions themselves will happen before by the end of May is our intention, and that clause 3A is very specific about the parties that we need to consult with as part of that process. So that's the TAs and other affected parties as well.
Right, thank you for that. Jeremy?
Just a quick question, just in regards to, as I was reading through this, and it just come to my mind, do we have a glossary for the te reo? There is a lot, we're getting more and more te reo, and I'm supportive of that, but actually for the people that have had no lessons and things like that are clearly defined, because a lot of this, you start talking about the te why objective, there's a lot of words in there that a lot of people won't actually know what they mean. I was just asking a question, do we communicate that well?
It's through Chair, it's certainly part of the intention for the wider communication in terms of an explanation of these concepts, which is why it's really key that we're doing it in partnership. It's not for us necessarily to define it in its entirety, but it's certainly we need to explain what we mean when we're saying these things. So yeah, that's part of the work that Adrian's team are doing. But yeah, that's one of them. A glossary of some kind would be helpful, I think.
Well, if someone's reading through that and they go, oh, what does that phrase? You know, it's a go-to point would be handy.
We've certainly got FAQs drafted that will cover some of those.
Things like that.
Yeah, I'll take Anne first then, Lloyd. Anne, I've got you. You're muted. You're still muted.
I'm frozen on my screen.
Is it? There we go.
Apologies. Thank you, Chair. I'm just noting on that glossary question, Lucy, I'm sure too that Te Ao Marama and Mike and team would be happy to oblige and run a casting eye over that. I definitely support it. I think it helps grow everyone's knowledge. And just noting back with the some of the visions, and I think this was raised via Te Ao Marama, there is an error, and apologies I don't have the page number in front of me, with the vision for Fiordland and Islands, FMU. So I think there's a aspiration that 2040 for Pātea or Doubtful Sound. However, due to the Manapōuri scheme, that wouldn't be possible. So it's similar to the WILE, that string, which so similar wording for Fiordland as well. So there's minor technical glitches.
Okay. Thank you for that. Lloyd?
Yeah, I presume that this executive document is actually going to be public, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I agree with that we need to put a glossary with the wording. I think in that glossary we also need to have the FMUs coloured out like we normally do. I think that would be handy. Because of that, there's two things. One is under the Fiordland and Islands, the Te Ara Whenua, everything I've looked at, there should be a gap in there. There should be 3 words, not 2, but I can be corrected on that.
We'd probably be interested to get Anne's view on that one. Did you get the question, Anne? Ata whenua, is that 2 words or 1 word?
It's not a name that I use for Fiordland, so it's not the one that we use usually under Noto naming. It's a modern concept that's come in, so it is spelt as 3 separate words, but maybe it's one that should be highlighted again with glossary terminology. So it's not actually one where you'll never find it in the Noto Settlement Act. So.
Okay.
The reason I raised it, Mr. Chairman, is when I Googled it to understand the meaning, because it means ground and landscape and shadow, it is in 3 words. So clarification. The other part is the first ones all have the same terminology, and I raised it in the workshop, was the fullest extent possible, but the last 2 do not have that. Is that the intent?
I think that's one of those errors that Anne's pointed to, Councillor, is that the fullest extent possible should be in others as well. So,
But that's my view as well, consistency across the region.
Okay. Any other questions on the report? Now, we've got recommendation, yes, Wilma?
Since Anne's raised this question, is, Lucy, I understood these questions have been worked through with John Marama. I'm just a bit concerned that we're using language that related to a promotional movie, perhaps for Fiordland, rather than Ngāi settlement names. So, and what would your preference be? Because once this committee decides, it's been given the responsibility from council to actually make the decision to go to consultation. I prefer that we actually used the name that was Ngāi Tahu's preference.
Yeah. Can we just do a bit of work on that? Robert, yes?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Wilma makes a very good point, and I think what we need to do here is ask mana whenua what they think about that and be guided by them.
I think that was the point I was making. Thank you for that, Robert. Any other questions? Now, yes, Lloyd?
Because I think we're in the recommendations now, is that correct?
Well, I was just going to point, we've got 2 3s.
Well, yes, it was there, but I actually wonder, Mr. Chairman, when I looked at this, do we actually need 1, 2 and 3? Because it's actually in the background report, it's in other parts anyway. The action here is for us to approve the draft to go, which is the second 3, to go out. That's the action. The others are just noting, and it's in other parts of the document anyway. I just wonder whether we're actually doubling up for the unnecessarily.
Got a comment on that, Wilma?
Entirely
Your
open.
guidance is
Councillors
required,
want
ma'am.
to comment on, Lucy might have a view as to why we require all of this.
I think because we've traversed quite a lot of this in the workshops, and the paper is obviously the public way that those workshops come to the fore, would be why those first three of 3.
Are you indicating a contribution, Nicol?
Yes, well, I think I would support Lucy on that. Well, we might understand that you've got the first 3 are noting, but it's actually, this is a pretty important step. We need the public to be
It's recording the workshop.
Yeah, and the noting is that this is actually a very narrow change to the regional policy statement, that we need to be able to incorporate the MPS and these various factors. And Lloyd's right, the last one is actually the approved.
It's the action.
But I think to give that full picture publicly, I'm reasonably comfortable with the noting.
Okay.
Are
we going to change 3 to 4 or 3A, or what are we doing?
We actually do 2 resolutions, 1 to 3, and then the 4th, because that's the action.
Join the noting ones.
Yes.
I was going to make a suggestion just to the way you just approach this, is that you could begin, so your points 1 to 3, interesting you've got 2 3s, but
Could be.
no, it's 1 to 3 could be the beginning of the recommendation. So it would read, Mr. Chair, noting the requirements, the request, the further approval that council resolves to. Point 4, approve the draft. If that makes sense. Do you understand what I'm suggesting?
Whatever works.
Yeah, would that work for you then, councillor? Because then you're noting all of the above matters and then you're approving one matter.
Yep, and that matter is now 4.
Yes.
Right.
And
So I'll take a recommendation that as amended, points 1 to 4. Someone like to move?
I can do that since
Yeah, I think so. You highlighted the key issues, so I'll accept your moving and seconded. Nicol, any further discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour would say aye. Against no, that's agreed. We now go to page 18, item 2, Climate Change Subcommittee, which is again a matter which we dealt with in committee. Who's Janelle? Thank you. Cool.
Thank you. So this item is to have council resolve to recommend the establishment of a climate change subcommittee. So we are doing a lot of work in the climate change area. So feel the need to have a group of council and a mana whenua representative together to focus on the area of climate change as part of our work portfolios. We've had nominations of various councillors to that committee and also seeking to approve the nomination of Councillor Ludlow to chair of that committee as well.
Yes, Lloyd? And then Peter.
We need to do this and we need to lead, I understand, for Southland. I'm just wondering, it's not here. I attended that meeting because I was between meetings, so I just sort of stayed in the chair. I hope my contribution was worthwhile. But one thing I picked up through that meeting was actually two major work streams here. One was the internal ES response as an organisation, but the other one was probably more important, was to actually lead Southland through this. And I'm just wondering whether somehow we should actually state there's two parts to this, and this committee is going to work on two major work streams, one internal, one being external. I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, whether that should actually be part of the recommendation.
I've got,
primarily external. I think the chair of the subcommittee has got a hand up.
Yeah, and Peter's also indicated, but if you're going to talk to Lloyd, we'll take that first, then we'll deal with Peter, then Lyndall in that order.
I think the Lyndall was urgently wanting to speak to
Oh,
she was waving.
Lyndall, now I can see you've gone to the top of the screen. Yeah, recognise. Lyndall, talk to us.
Sorry, it was only a little bit urgent. Just in response to Councillor McCallum's point, I think that can come up in the terms of reference that the committee still has to define. So I think that conversation's really important because I think I raised it actually, but we still, the terms of reference might be the place where we can cover that off.
Cool. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Lloyd made a really good point. There is two very distinct areas, and the second one is around provincial leadership. And the question is leadership about bringing people in? I know this subcommittee, we could have the ability to bring others in to help or to sit on that subcommittee too. I'm thinking more of the technical expertise around Great South, for example, have been very active with business in Invercargill and around Southland around climate change. But also an outside view of maybe a youth councillor or something someone along those lines that can give us a perspective into the future. But I'd like to say that I fully support this subcommittee. I think it's a really good initiative by this council, so well done. And the communication part of it is really important because the community is saying we're being bombarded with climate change all the time, but what actually can we do? And we've just got to start communicating with the community around what's happening.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Yeah, Nicole?
Yes, so just looking at it now, to have a regionally led committee, my question is this a subcommittee that is going to then have a larger one? Because obviously we need TAs involved in that too. And the Mayoral Forum has indicated that they believe we should be doing the regional leadership. But it's good, it can't be in isolation. We actually, to be effective, we need to have all the parties in the room, so there needs to be representatives. So I guess is this the subcommittee that is going to then lead on to a larger Southland committee or not? Because if this is the committee, I think we do have to have a slightly larger clientele.
Lloyd?
I think the answer is actually what Lyndall basically said. Let this committee get established, find out what the parameters are for internal and external, and come back. It actually raises the second part of the question is what committees does council have and what importance do we have on them? So maybe this is the first step down a line of work, but let's get them underway and they'll tell us what they need or what their vision is going forward. So maybe in that terms of reference, that's where the key is.
Wilma?
Just to speak to that, this committee and this council can really only set up at this point this subcommittee, and so Councillor Horrell's quite correct that if there is to be a joint committee, that will be something that I would assume through the development terms of reference will be part of the leadership that this committee will be having with the region. We needed this committee established to assist with developing that first regional hui that we're working towards, and what falls out of that may well be a joint committee. And, we'll manage the procedures around that at that time.
All right. Any other contributions? We have 3 recommendations. Someone like to move the recommendations?
Move it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Seconded. Peter. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour would say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. That's agreed. People on screen can indicate by waving to me. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just say, I'm not sure procedurally, and you all know this answer better than me, but this committee's been given the delegation from council to make this decision, so this is actually a decision of council, so I'm not sure if there's a status with that you need to actually refer to in the minutes anywhere, the council's resolution from the previous council meeting. But if we do, can you just note that, perhaps, Michaela, so that it's not a recommendation back to council,
It is a decision.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Got that, Michaela? Cool, perfect. Item 3, page 20. It's you again,
Me again,
Lucy,
Chair.
you go for it.
So this paper is to note for the committee that the State of the Environment report that is pulled together by Stats NZ and the Ministry for the Environment was released in April. There's a new format for that report. It's one that is done regularly. It utilises information of ours, the State of the Environment information and other scientific reports, as well as other regions, to provide that national picture. We've tabled it for your information so that there's some interesting things there we thought that you might take some interest in, and we obviously wanted to raise with you. It's, from our perspective, it's not new information, it's just compiled slightly differently, and certainly the format of it is very different this year than in previous reports. They've used the 9 stars of Matariki, and each of those represent a different aspect of the environment and the people's connection to it. There is a future focus in terms of how other reporting will be advanced in years to come. So they are currently reviewing the environmental reporting system, and we're obviously very aware of the Resource Management Act reforms that are coming too. So this is certainly seen as a change that may be pulled through in those future years. But it really is just for noting at this stage. I'm happy to answer any questions, but from a kind of where to from here for us, it's information we already had, and so it's just about.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question of clarification, really, Lucy, is under the, on page 21, item 12, Indigenous land cover loss between 2012 and 18, 3,944 hectares within Murihiku Southland. What is actually that? I mean, what are we looking at? It seems a hell of a lot. What is it?
Through your chair, it's principally in the area of deforestation and the clearing of land for pasture. So that's what they've assigned it to within that time frame.
Weird, isn't it?
And also another one.
I've got everybody with their hand up here. Nicole, then Jeremy.
Just another one on page 22. Yeah, just the soil quality, and just looking at that, 80% of the 602 measured sites failed the meeting of at least one of 7 soil quality indicators. I'm just wondering what those soil quality indicators are. It seems, I mean, as somebody that turns over the land and works the land, it seems rather high. As soil quality, I'm not quite sure. I'm probably looking for an answer as to what.
Delve into the full report, David.
Sorry?
I said delve into the full report, and you'll get a flavour as to where the direction is.
Right.
More of an environmental focus rather than perhaps an agronomy focus as to what is good soil.
Let's come back to those that have indicated. We'll take Nicole first, then Jeremy.
Yes, I was
Mr. Fine.
surprised at because this report uses different timeframes, which does make it a little bit confusing. But I'm very surprised at the almost 4,000 hectares loss in a 6-year period. By 2012 to 18, that just doesn't seem to quite gel. In earlier times, certainly, because I would have thought there would be minimal native vegetation. If we went back a bit further than that, certainly the chip mill was going and there were still things going on, but I would question the accuracy of that figure. I mean, that's an appalling figure if it's correct, but it just doesn't seem to gel with what we actually see on the ground there. So the other one I'm looking at is the number about the cultural health index at Tuatapere. Before they put in the sewage scheme some years ago, there was fair indication that there was a septic tank type problem. If there's still a problem there, I'd certainly like to know why.
Jeremy was next.
If I just, another point of clarification, obviously we're all focused on the 4,000 hectares. Do we, obviously this is ES's information.
Partially. So the information that's freely available via our State of the Environment reports, etc. Yeah.
Is it taken into account of the new stuff that's been planned?
No,
there's obviously people doing things, and we might, they might be lost, but I know, physically we know there are fencing getting done, replanting, and I was driving down the road today and I was looking at that's been fenced off, that's new wetland, new wetland, new wetland. So we always see what we see lost, but we never see what actually things being done. So, and that's a positive too, and it's sometimes quite annoying from all the work that's getting done, but never gets gauged. It should be offset. I'm not saying this is bad, but I mean, there's a lot going on too.
Lloyd?
Yes, I'm just going to agree with, that was my point, that there are Indigenous land gains as well. And maybe you could say that every new covenanted area is a gain. You look at the lower Waio where former pasture has been converted into habitat and things being converted and planted programs, so there is certainly a gain. And I don't know if it matches the supposed loss there, but there is a gain as well as a loss.
Right, thank you. Alan, and then Peter.
Yeah, so just a clarification on the data that's gone into this report. Is this Environment Southland's data, particularly this 4,000 hectares, or is it another entity's data? Is it Landcare Research? Because I feel it's possibly their information more than ours, but I want to clarify that.
Through you, Chair, I might just answer some of the questions that have been of a similar vein. So in terms of the accuracy question, I can certainly come back to you on that one, but in my understanding of the report is it pulls from multiple sources, so it would be some of our information and some others. In terms of the where question around that 4,000 hectares lost and the lack of how you can account for the most recent updates, it is that 6 years that runs to 2018, so to the Chairman's point, it's not going to take account of the last 5 years worth of good stuff because it only goes as far as 2018. But I can certainly come back with more information on those other matters around source of information, etc. And the soil quality indicator question that Councillor Stevens raised, which I don't have an answer to.
In the order that I have noticed them, I have Peter and then Robert. Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My question is also around, a bit similar to Jeremy's, about a net gain or a net loss. I see 78% increase in dairy cows since 2002 to 2019. Is that a net gain or a net loss in regards to stock units? That probably is not in the report, but probably should be.
So through Chair again, at paragraph 13, where it talks about the increase in dairy cattle numbers, doesn't talk to intensity, talks to stocking numbers in a kind of absolute.
I thought it would be quite helpful, instead of a large figure like that, is to actually get the net gain or net increase across the province on all stock classes.
All right, so Anne now. You're muted, good, thank you.
Kia ora, and Lucy's comments helped to some point, but I would note that, you know, as we said, that data is quite outdated, being from, you know, a lot of it from 2017 for Aotearoa NZ, State of the Environment. So, you know, for cultural things, what we're seeing is consistently bad news, no good news. And what we're probably looking for is what is the plan for action and rehabilitation and something positive, which of course obviously requires some updated data and to actually celebrate good achievements, which, you know, many of the councillors have actually noted, and a plan to how we're going to actually tackle the stuff that has been lagging.
Cool, thank you for that. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just an observation from my point of view that it sounds as though with the presentation of this data and this material that it's being challenged, and it's being challenged, the science and so on, being challenged by what almost seems to be a lobby group, and that is the farmers on the council. It's just an observation. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying from an outsider's point of view, there was an uprising of anguish about this proposal that's been put in front of it, or this data that's been put in front of us. It hasn't come from city folk generally.
Is it because, Robert, we get out and we look around and when we observe?
I don't know whether we're going to debate that point. I think we'll just acknowledge the point that Robert's made. Yeah. Jeremy? Oh no, hang on, Lloyd was next. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of three things. I think I had to go to the full report because I wasn't getting enough information on what was presented. When I go to the full report, it's actually set out a little bit differently than it's been reported to us. So each section is actually having the combination of the iwi language and the meaning in English, so you can actually understand it better. That said, there seems to also be a change in the reporting style between how it's written to us. So we could jump from words to numbers and numbers to words even within the same sentence. And I'm wondering, it's just harder to read because your eye gets drawn to the things and you miss different points. There seems to be a number of questions raised here. And I don't think we're going to solve it all today. This is just one of the reports that comes through that we need to be aware of, and maybe at some stage we can report other information or try and have more updated information to the parties that write these reports, even if we had a direct line to there to try and bring through, because we're taking the community here on a journey, and if we're going to take them on a journey, we need up-to-date information, and this seems to be a gap between what's reported here and where people are, and if we can bridge that gap a little bit better, I think we'd be in a better place.
Righto, Jeremy and then Peter.
Yeah, I'd love to debate with Mr. Guyton, Councillor Guyton. What it is though, it is interesting information, and any information's good, but it's also challenging. Going, okay, we want to see where that 4,000 hectares has gone. I'd be challenging and having a look in the last 30 years what's gone on in the rural area, you know, and it's not the last 5 or 10 years. There's been, you know, planting, shout-abouts, the wetlands. Okay, there's been a lot of drainage too, and the other things, but it's but there's a lot going on. But it's actually to understand, it's good information now. We've got a couple of questions. Well, okay, show us those areas so we can understand what is the native bush that's getting destroyed, or what is the wetlands that they're actually saying have been taken out here. Because, you know, from trying to communicate it to the public, is a wetland a tusk and a paddock, or is it actually a big lagoon? You know, like they're the questions and definitions we need on this data. So, that's what. Comment?
Peter?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The discussion we just had was around native, seemed to dominate, was the native vegetation. It really sits outside our brief as a council. It's under the district plan and the Southland District Council. And that, my further question is, how are they supporting that? do they have the capability in their offices to monitor what's going on? And take Jeremy's point just then, is scrub. Scrub is native vegetation in a lot of instances. So so it speaks volumes, I think, for the lack of capability of enforcing that plan.
My observation when I saw that was I was surprised. But then, as someone who is yet to be flight shamed, because I do important stuff all over New Zealand, my view was if that is accurate for Southland, it's highly inaccurate for the rest of New Zealand. That would be my view on it. So, were you indicating, Nicol?
Yes, Mr. Chair, when I look at this report, and this is a public document now, it goes out, there is some, it's not clear. I mean, you've got 12, 17, 18, 19, we're all talking about much the same stuff, and some of it's cumulative, and Robert thinks we're being defensive, but I just want accuracy. I want to be able to put a clear and accurate picture out to the public, and so it's something maybe we could have another report on, just making some of those things clear, because if it's right, we have to own it. If it's unclear and we're sending mixed messages, that's my concern.
Yeah, I think I could respond to that too. That in some regard, I think land that has been cleared and regenerated, and Gianna Downs Station comes to mind, where they're going back to, and we saw the photos when we did the water and land plan of country that was cleared in the 30s, and then it's regenerated, and the argument is that it's going back again, and I'm not sure how that's dealt with, because that's probably about half that number that's in there, and whether or not it's regenerative, or whether it's, at what point do you say it's native? I mean, and we need some accuracy around that, I think it's probably a fair point. Lucy, were you going to make a contribution?
Just again to help to move things along possibly. But yes, happy to report back on the more detail around certainly the Indigenous land cover, and to Councillor McDonald's point in terms of how we are needing to be working together with our partners. I think as well, what I would just say as a final point from me on this one is the data speaks to the need for us to be more joined up and to be more integrated, which is what we've obviously already got on the boil and in progress, but certainly when we talk about wetlands or Indigenous land cover, the co-benefits for those areas in terms of climate change and the other matters, it's good information to have, so long as it is accurate and we can use it for other things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this report obviously is going out to the general public, but if we can get more clarification, is there an ability there actually to put that with that report, or is this going out prior to any clarification?
So through you, Chair, the report's already out. It's live already. It was released in the middle of April, I believe. So and it was that release that we then we saw, and so they haven't sought our feedback on it. It's a combination of data that we probably need to dive a little deeper into and come back to you to answer your specific questions.
If there is any substantial change or clarification, is there a possibility of actually putting that out?
I would certainly look into that as part of the...
Okay, thank you. Thank you. This report is for noting, and we've had a fairly fulsome discussion. I'd like to see the resolution moved and move to the next piece of business if we can do it. You're moving. Thank you, Lloyd McCallum. Seconded Peter McDonald. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour would say aye. Against, no. That's agreed. Item 4, page 25. Bonnie, you're in charge.
Kia ora koutou, everybody this morning. This update on the People Lead program, I'll take it as read, but just to note that we have a workshop over the next 2 days with the Regional Forum, tomorrow and next day online. We were hoping to be meeting in person, and that's our plans for June, but we are just conscious of the continuing impact of COVID on our families and communities. And the forum are at the point in their development of their advice where this meeting is quite critical. They are, in essence, sort of finalising their recommendations over the next 2 days, and the intention is to, by being online, to make sure we have as many as possible available to participate. We have a workshop with the Council and Te Marama Board planned for the 25th of May, so a continuation of the series we've been having with you since the program began, but particularly since the start of this year, with the Chair and Deputy Chair attending and actively sort of talking through their work and their development of their advice. And then there is a plan for a workshop on the 8th of June, hopefully at Te Rau Araha Marae, with the full forum to go through the package at that time. So we are still working towards a date of bringing that package of advice to the Council and Te Marama Board in June, with the next strategy and policy meeting tentatively earmarked for the formal presentation of that advice. It does depend on how their work goes in the next 2 days, and there may be some change around to that time frame, but that is what we're working towards.
Okay,
just that's really what I wanted to update on in terms of the forum's substantive work. You will recall we had a series of environmental challenges hui last year, and just to note that we've been doing some interviews with people who attended those meetings just to look at what gaps there are in terms of community outreach and leadership, knowledge leadership in our community, and we will bring that work through to you as well subsequently in terms of where that might take us forward. I think that's largely the update from our end.
Before I open up discussion on this, Lyndall, I've just been made aware you were seeking to make a comment on the last item. I apologise for not noticing you, and if you have something more fulsome than you've put in your chat, please indicate it and we'll acknowledge that comment. Right, sorry about that. Right, so
no problem. Thanks, Chairman. I'll email it.
thank you. Multitasking is not a man thing, so I'm sorry. Right, we'll take discussion on this item.
Couldn't possibly comment, Chairman.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Bonnie, the whole program, you're dealing with a lot of outside support groups, and in context of what's happened in the last couple of years with a huge disruption through COVID, and that started way back in March of 2020, didn't it, really? Are you confident that the program we have timeframes, we have dates that we want to achieve? Are you confident that we'll get to that point like you just described, with everything ticked off, and you're satisfied that the forum has undertaken a full process? That's my question, basically.
I am confident they've undertaken a real fulsome process. They have continued to meet very regularly, even through COVID. So they've been really committed, and just the enthusiasm and the passion that they bring to this process is amazing. But as ever, when you get to the crunchy point of formalising or finalising your work, often that sort of takes a little bit longer just to tease things out. So I'm confident they will be there. They are involved in this process in terms of where we set this up through to the end of this year, and the intention is that some of those forum members, particularly the Chair and Deputy Chair, will remain available to support any communication and any work that we require and Te Marama might require of them through till the end of the year, and particularly when the new council is elected, and potentially in terms of briefings, etc. So there is that work, but you're right about the actual substantive work. It is very close to being completed. I think they've done a very good job, and it's just a matter of bringing that together over the next 6 to 8 weeks, I think. So there might be some change in timeframes, but I don't see it being particularly long.
It's probably a question I would ask to the wider council too. We've got the forum's view on it, that they're comfortable with those timeframes and achieving what they want to achieve. Are we, as a council, in that same boat? It's just an open question.
Lloyd?
I'll go back and I'll end up with what Peter's raised. I think we need to have a formal thank you to the forum. We need to think about that now and a formal discharge. So, because they've done this work we initiated it through a program, we need to finish it so they know they can walk away, job done. The second part is we need to acknowledge the report. Now, we may like it, we may not, we may have changes and different views, but we need to accept the report formally somehow in some way, maybe it's it. The time frame one, I think we put ourselves on a time frame. The thing that probably gets me more than anything else is that it's very easy to lose time, and we've got Environment Court process happening at the same time. We've got expectations from government through NESs and NPSs all coming on to us all at once. So we need some time just to make sure that we've got everything being pulled together for the sake of the community, and then being able to repeat it back to them in a logical, sensible way to take them on the journey. They've heard a lot of stuff, there's been a lot of communication, but we actually need, that's basically another work stream, is to take what we know out and actually take us on that next part, which is probably the people, water and land plan program, with the limits and those sorts of things sort of tucked in there. So I think I'm happy where we are in the process. We're just waiting really for the report, and we're trying to bring all this other stuff together at once, which is quite a crescendo of information. I don't think we expected quite like that, but that's how the cards have been dealt.
Right, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, Bonnie. The contact with Thriving Southland, is that quite ongoing? Because there's a number of things going on there. In our own particular area, they're doing a radiometric survey, which will take place, or it's supposed to have started already, on the Belfort, what they call Belfort fan, and it'll have a huge bearing on actually limit setting within the area and just outside that area too. So I'm just wondering whether that close contact is obviously things changing all the time, and there's a lot of things going on within those catchments. So whether that's taking place.
Through you, Chair, just to respond to that one, if it's appropriate. Yes, we do have a really close relationship with Thriving Southland. So Rachel Miller is kind of our key lead in that relationship, and works very closely.
Yeah, I've got Rachel's indicating, so
I'll hand to Rachel to answer that question.
beam in, Rachel, we've got you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to follow on from Bonnie's comment, yes, we are meeting frequently with Thriving Southland, and in terms of the different projects that are being undertaken, well aware obviously of both the AgMart project happening in the wider Mataura as well as the specific project in the Wendon site. But we have got Thriving on standby to come and give an update to Council at a workshop on the 2nd of June on this topic. So we'll bring that through to you at that point.
Thanks, Rachel. Other comments? Someone ready to move the recommendation?
I'm happy to move.
Yeah, moved Nicol, seconded David. Any further discussion? Put the motion. Those in favour say aye. Against no. That's agreed. Were you indicating, Bonnie?
I was just going to note that we do have, just related back to your point earlier about communication, maybe doing some work around how we would communicate the work of the forum, and we'll share that with you. And also, just that acknowledgement of the forum's work. We do have intentions to have a dinner, potentially as part of our meeting when we meet with them on the 8th and 9th, but then, there might be appropriate something further down the track once everything's absolutely finalised as well. So just acknowledge those are on the radar, and we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. We move to item 5 on page 28, science update. New one is, yeah. Cool. Come to the table. Talk to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to present this estuary item. And with your permission, I would like to present brief summary of our estuary monitoring program. So this is the overview of my presentation. First, the background to our estuary monitoring program, and then why estuaries are important, then where we monitor, which ecological indicators we measure, and then the current state and trend of our estuary, Southland estuaries, remediation options for Southland estuaries, and then finally pending or completed scientific output. Okay, so first, why does the program exist? I hope we all aware that estuaries are the terminal receiving environments of our catchment, and as such are under significant stress from catchment pressures such as sedimentation, contaminant runoff, land use development, and damage from other human activities such as land reclamation. So the purpose of our estuary monitoring program is to assess ecological state of estuaries in Southland, and the program is used to satisfy the Council's statutory obligations to monitor and report on the state of the environment. And we have been monitored Southland estuaries since 2001 and reports on the current state and trend of Southland estuaries. Next, why estuaries are important. Estuaries are classified as one of the most productive ecosystems in the world and provide critical habitat for a wide range of species such as birds, fish, and invertebrates. On the other hand, estuaries provide a range of valuable ecosystem services for humans, such as food provision, filter contaminants, thereby protecting the nearby coastal environment, and nutrient regulation. Right. Where we monitor. So there are 8 estuaries we currently monitor. As you can see, these estuaries comes in all shapes and sizes, which means each estuary responds to stressors differently. And these systems are monitored on a 5-year schedule depending on their level of degradation. For example, if the system is in decline condition, then monitoring is carried out on an annual or biannual basis. Otherwise, monitoring is carried out on 3 to 5 years interval. Right. Next, what we do? We monitor the health of these estuaries using 2 approaches. The first, broad-scale habitat mapping, which including mapping seagrass area, salt marsh, macroalgae, and substrate. And next, fine-scale monitoring, which is monitoring of sediment metals, nutrients, and benthic fauna at a specific locations. Okay. So what have we observed so far? So this table shows the current state of estuaries that are being monitored with regards to some of the ecological indicators we have measured, including soft mud, nutrients, sediment oxygen level, macroalgae cover, seagrass loss, and trace metals. So freshwater estuary in the Stewart Island is at the top and represent the very pristine conditions. But while the New River estuary is at the bottom of the table, which represent degraded condition. And the next, if we look into how macroalgae, high enrichment conditions, and seagrass cover have been changed for each estuarine system since the monitoring began. So here you can see the New River estuary in 2001, percentage cover of moderate to dense macroalgae was 2%, or roughly 62 hectares. And I really apologize that in my estuary item I haven't included the numeric values. So in 2021, actually 15% of the intertidal area, 15% of the intertidal area covered with moderate to dense macroalgae, or as the hectare, as a numeric value, it's 442 hectares. Next, Jacob River Estuary. So in 2021, 16% of the intertidal area, or roughly it's 82 hectares, covered by dense macroalgae. However, there was an improvement in the condition compared to baseline value, to 2004 value, but this was attributed to macroalgae dieback due to poor sediment condition rather than actual improvement of the system. And the next one, the Fort Ross Estuary. So despite very high nutrient load, there was relatively little macroalgae growth on main tidal flats of this estuary. Physical factors such as flood scoring or wave action likely limit the establishment of macroalgae in Fort Ross Estuary. The next, Waikawa Estuary. With regards to nutrient enrichment, Waikawa Estuary is currently expressing localized symptoms associated with nuisance macroalgae. And the extent of these areas have ranged between 0.3 to 0.7, roughly 1 hectare to 2 hectares of the estuary since 2004. The next, high enrichment condition. So high enrichment condition is defined as areas where low sediment oxygen, soft mud contain more than 25%, and macroalgae cover more than 50%. In New River Estuary, actually these high enrichment areas increase from 0.8% or 23 hectares to 12%, roughly 340 hectares from 2001 to 2021. The next, Jacob River Estuary. So Jacob River Estuary currently 17% or roughly 86 hectares of the estuary form high enrichment conditions. Next, Fort Ross Estuary. Fort Ross Estuary, the high enrichment areas located actually in sheltered depositional zones and first reported in 2016, but had reduced in extent in 2021, largely due to erosion and flood scoring. Next, change in seagrass extent. So New River Estuary, we lost 82% or roughly 57 hectares of seagrass bed from the system, and attributed to smothering by fine sediment, low oxygen levels in sediment, and also macroalgal overgrowth. The next, the largest seagrass losses have occurred in the West Waihopai Arm, as you can see in this map. So almost all seagrass beds disappeared from this area. Next one is Jacob River Estuary. Again, since 2003, there have been 56% or roughly 18 hectares of seagrass bed lost from the system, and the largest losses in the Porcano Arm. The decline is attributed to, again, smothering by fine sediment and macroalgal overgrowth. So the next active remediation option for Southland estuaries. In 2019, NEWA prepared a report on remediation options for Southland estuaries to identify the high-level benefits and feasibility of 8 different remediation options, as you can see in this item, listed in the item. And then to extend this initial work and explore restoration options able to be more readily implemented at a community level, we engage Salt Ecology to provide additional advices, and they have prepared the technical report and came up with three potential options. So first one is removal of nuisance macroalgae from healthy parts of the estuary before they develop into persistent eutrophic areas. And next, the protection and restoration of salt marsh and sand dunes through community engagement. Right. Next, where to next, or what pending or recent scientific outputs? We have given contract to Cawthorne Institute in order to develop benthic health models for Southland estuaries. So benthic health models measure impact of sedimentation and heavy metal contamination on benthic macrofaunal communities in New Zealand estuaries. Actually, this benthic health models is similar to freshwater MCI or macroinvertebrate community index. So based on the index value, we can categorize the estuary health from poor to very good condition. And also benthic health models help to compare estuary health condition regionally and nationally. So the next EnviroLink project to explore the relationship between nutrient loads and macroalgae response. So this project will collect nutrient loads and state of environment monitoring data from New River Estuary since 2001, and in order to explore the relationship. And macroalgae response is a key attribute in Environment Southland's limit setting process, and is one of the primary eutrophication indicators that have been used to calculate contaminant reduction across the region. Then last, larva estuary model reporting, and this project will launch in June this year, and this will greatly help to compare our estuary conditions nationally. Yes, so that's all about my presentation.
Very comprehensive. Thank you, Nuwan. So, Lloyd, yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a very interesting report. I've been witness to a lot of those changes, particularly in the Daffodil Bay area over the last 20 years. And from a time when you could walk out on the estuary, I pushed a wheelchair out across to the kid in a wheelchair out across to the Retian River Channel. But there's, you know, you can go a few feet now and then you're into anaerobic mud. So it is a truly awful thing. It's an ecological disaster. I believe that coincides with the intensification of farming and the addition of nitrogen to the system. And I was looking at all those the options here at the bottom of page 33, and you know, removing this and diverting the river, good heavens, and rearranging the mouth of the estuary, I thought, good heavens again. And then I turned over the page, and there is the acknowledgement there, the first statement on the top of page 34, which says, without removing the root cause of the problem, which is the nutrient input, no significant change in overall estuary health will be observed. So there's the answer we have to work towards, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Alan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we're monitoring, obviously, the components in the estuary that you indicated. As far as the sea life, the birds and the crustaceans, the things that are in the estuary, do we monitor them as well?
We monitor crustacean, macroinvertebrate, but not the birds at the moment. Yeah.
I'm monitoring the birds.
Yeah, and even we are not monitoring fish species. Yeah, we are only monitoring macroinvertebrates.
And so is the trend the same? Is there a concern with who's living in the estuary as well? It's obviously the chemical elements of the estuary that we are concerned about. Is there a correlation between how they're surviving and the quantity is in their habitat? Have we made their habitat quite difficult for them?
Yes, actually, the macroinvertebrate shows the good correlation with the estuary, the trace metals, and also sedimentation. That's why actually we propose to develop these benthic health models, actually, because benthic health model shows the relationship between macroalgae, sedimentation, and trace metal levels. And based on the sediment trace metals and the sediment trace metal and sedimentation or muddiness, so the macroalgae species could be changed. For example, the muddy areas, you can only find more tolerant species, invertebrates, but the more pristine environment like Stewart Island, you can find a diverse range of macroinvertebrates. Yeah, there is a very good correlation between the macroinvertebrates and the stressors.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That is very comprehensive, very good. And I think for me, looking at that, the key statement there was around the high enrichment conditions in the New River Estuary, gone from 2001, 23 hectares and climbed up to 340 hectares. And that really caught my attention. And I'd just like to pick up on the wider issue of the New River Estuary, and Lloyd next to me picked up on that about upper catchment and farming-based activities. And of course, this council is dominated around those actions, be it intensive winter grazing, regulation, water and land plan work. So we've got a myriad of actions happening in the catchment to turn off that tap, so to speak. What I think we should do now is be looking to grow a partnership down at that estuary with the Invercargill City Council and iwi together, and I think that's a meeting place for us to join together to get some really action, to start some serious work down there. So yes, thanks very much again for the report. I would certainly like to see some action go on from last year. I think it was, we took a bus trip down to the estuary, for that to continue.
Yes, Councillor, actually, regarding the last year, the field trip to Treasure Bay. After that, actually, we have given contract to Patel and Delmore partners to explore sediment trace metal levels in Treasure Bay area, and they already conducted surveys, but currently we are waiting for the results. Yes.
Right, I think over here, Nicole now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, a very interesting and comprehensive report, and I guess it provides more questions than answers, but you probably identified the two key things are sedimentation and the nutrient load. When I look at something like Bluff Harbour, which has been extensively dredged over the years, it seems to be quite a bit more healthy, and I'm wondering whether the dredging factor is one of the answers to the equation, particularly New River. If you took it right up, you would just get an elevator effect, but possibly at that bottom end to help flows. But the nutrient load, there's some of the work that's going on at the moment, and we talk about nuisance seaweed, which feeds on the nutrients and then dies, and was a problem at the bottom. And I've thought for a long time, if we renovated, perhaps we could have the asparagus, asparagus type of seaweed that was actually suspended and took up the nutrients and was harvested. We've seen other places where they've brought in mussels, great corporation. There's probably some things in nature we could probably exploit going forward to actually make a difference there. And the other one is the planting we talked about, the salt marsh. And we need to get, I guess, some comprehensive answers going forward as to what's going to make a difference. I mean, New River is it's not an easy fix, but I think, as Peter said, trying to get a community involvement what can we start to do to actually start to turn these things around. The Jacobs Estuary, we're seeing a worsening effect in the Porokeno arm. And I think it probably was a weather event. We actually have seen some improvement in the other arm. So I guess there are probably more the questions than answers, and we know that our estuaries are our Achilles heel because we've got legacy issues. That's where everything ends up. But we know they're important for the life that's in them, for the ability for Kai, and all sorts of reasons they're important. And I'd actually like to see us get a bit more information about what's going on, particularly around New Zealand. There's been some funding being put into the North Island. I'm not sure how practical it is, but this is a big issue and we need to be able to get enough information to try and give us some answers going forward.
Thank you, Nicole. I have Lloyd, McCallum, Lyndall and Robert indicating, so we'll go to Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first field trip, being a councillor, was going out to the estuary, and Lloyd Eastler at that stage, who wasn't on the council, gave us a presentation and slogged his way through the mud and explained what was happening in the estuary. Well, I am a bit critical of the fact that we've monitored and data sought and gathered for a period of time, but I'm really into the blue sky thinking period. There is a catchment group down there, but I don't think they're supported well enough by a range of institutions, as others have mentioned. We can monitor this thing forever and we're going to get the same result. The monitoring should actually be to monitor, make sure that the work program that we have in place is actually speeding us up in action or is slowing us down because it's not actually working correctly. This is multi-complex. There is a lot of stuff happening here. I can give you a list. I wrote down here on my computer a list of stuff that's actually in the estuary itself, and that's not including the stuff that needs to happen further up the catchment. So, Mr. Chairman, we were talking yesterday actually as we went to the smelter community meeting. We actually need to do some blue sky thinking on some of this stuff and actually start to understand where do we as a community, led by us, actually need to take the investment or the thinking and actually put actions on the ground. We're held up by our own processes. Consenting periods for this sort of stuff is very long, and we need to get the discharge of sewage out of there. We need to do some work around the dump site, and we need to stop cross-contamination between sewage and stormwater. The Macquarie River is sitting in sediment. I see it every time I come into town, coming down there because we re-engineered it and straightened it. There is a number of things that have crescendoed into the estuary. So looking forward, I really think we need to start to think about what are we going to do, not about just how we're going to monitor and monitor and monitor, because we already know it's in a very poor state.
Yeah.
So let's look forward on what we can invest and do.
Thank you. Lyndall?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't actually indicating, but
I'm so guilty. I missed you last time.
I could say something. I did put in the chat that this is a conversation that involves the territorial authorities as well, and that kind of follows on from Councillor McCallum's point, I guess. But I hope he's not suggesting that we stop monitoring, because actually we need plenty and some modelling forward, rather than, because data gathering is kind of not backward in the recent past, whereas we actually need to be looking for some forward planning options, which I think is what you're actually saying, Councillor McCallum. But yeah, territorial authorities and the New River Estuary Forum are key players in this, I think. Thanks.
Right, Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to the discussion, I sense a huge disconnect from reality. And why I say that is because out here where I live in Riverton, beside the Jacobs River Estuary, and as chairman of the Riverton Estuary Care Society and developer of the Te Waikorare Wetland Reserve down on the edge of the estuary, one of the issues that's front and centre for us is sea level rise. we have some areas where gorse is trying to establish itself on our estuary, on our reserve. I feel we don't need to worry about it because the rising levels of water, which were signalled just last week by the government officially, and especially in terms of insuring your homes if you're on the seaside, as you know, this is big news. But it seems as though we're not taking this into account. All of these fiddlings around that we're proposing or hoping will happen, dredging or this or that, pale into insignificance if we don't take into account what we're being told about climate change and about sea level rise, and also about the roughening of the weather. Everything has changed. It seems as though we're way behind the 8 ball here, if that's the right expression. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, Wilma?
Just to let councillors know that we at the staff are meeting this week together with local city council staff, Thriving Southland, and the New River Estuary Forum, which who we do that with is now an established pattern, to actually get this piece of joint up work together. One thing that was on my mind in coming into this meeting today, Mr. Chair, was whether or not, given that we are meeting with the community forum as well, is whether or not we should, from this committee, have council representatives who are sort of working in a kind of joint way with staff specifically on this matter. I'm not sure what status that would be as, whether it's just appointees that we're actually liaising with here, but have some councillors who are most interested, particularly if we're getting further into community work as an outcome of this meeting. So this meeting currently that's with ICCs with their staff, but certainly the New River Estuary Forum is a community organisation and has Dr. Liz Craig on it as well.
Thank you. One of the things I've been keen to do is to have some reporting of the science activity that's going. So as councillors, we are appraised of the work that's happening and doing in New. Thank you for putting that presentation together for us. Would someone like to move the recommendation that the report be noted? Alan and Lloyd, Esler. Put the motion, those in favour would say aye, against no, that's agreed. I think you're still in the chair, New, because we've got the periphyton one now, item 6. What's that? Oh, right, okay. Cheers. Roger.
If I may, the comment from Wilma was really unanswered, in my view. And part of it, I think staff need to meet for a start, but I think we've got to get the governance body together.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit, if I was really honest with myself, I'd rather like to keep those two separate, not mixed.
I agree.
And I think we probably need to think about the staff reports up to the councillors becomes very important, because the councillors at the end of the day will make decisions on investment. So I think we need to explore that a bit better and probably a little bit faster. This is something that more people are starting to take notice about.
I agree.
And socially we have responsibility to do something.
Yes. So it was quite a lot of players to get together for this meeting that we're having on Friday. So it would have been better if that had happened ahead of this meeting, so we could have reported to you on what happened. But we will bring that back. But I think this is an area where there will be ongoing work, of a joint nature, and that may well be something for discussion as to how council then involves itself at a governance level in that joint work.
I just say, look, I support that idea, absolutely. We can't just keep going from one bus trip to another. When we get work like this that comes up, we've got to have a concerted approach.
Sorry to hold things up, Mr. Chairman. We have a number of estuaries, not just New River. So we need to think about what we can do in those others alongside the investment here. So it really becomes an estuary committee more than a New River estuary.
Yep. Nicole?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest we do have an item come up to to the next meeting, because I think the idea of having some governance tied up with the new river ones already formed. I know some of the others, there's probably a sub-catchment type interest in them, but actually having that linked up approach, I know there's one or two councillors who have sort of expressed an interest in being involved. I don't think it's something we do today, but I think perhaps a report coming back to the next meeting to actually explore that would be really good.
All right, thank you. Well, let's do the periphyton report. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item provides a brief update on the periphyton monitoring in Southland and focuses on some of the results observed this summer. I just note that I've made an amendment, or would like to make an amendment to Table 2, and we'll provide that to Michaela for inclusion in the minutes and present it as amended in this presentation. And also just note that our ability to report on the entire summer is limited because we have a slight lag in the receipt of all of our laboratory results. So, okay, I shall take the item as read and move through the presentation.
Lloyd?
Oh, sorry, no, you do. I'll wait till the end of your presentation.
You fit.
Okay, thank you.
Are you ready for questions?
Oh, no, let's
see. Right, you've got a presentation.
That's okay, yeah. So, provide a brief background to the periphyton monitoring in Southland, where we monitor, and then by way of illustration with some photographs, primarily look at some key locations from each of our main river catchments over the summer just been. So, background here, periphyton is the slime algae sometimes, as it's referred to, including cyanobacteria and other organisms growing on the bed of the aquatic environment. In this case, we're talking about rivers. It's fundamental to support freshwater aquatic life. It's the base of the food chain. However, excess periphyton in the river can have negative impacts on ecosystem and human health, as well as aesthetic and cultural values. Where we monitor, so we've been monitoring periphyton since the end of 2014 at 30 sites and added an additional 3 sites to 4 sites in 18-19 in collaboration with Meridian on the Waiau River. And so just visually illustrating over the summer that 8 of 19, 42% of the sites that we monitored exceeded thresholds in the Southland Land Plan for periphyton cover, and noting that the sites in grey there do not have thresholds for periphyton in the river plan. This is the amended Table 2, focusing on cyanobacteria and health warnings that were issued over the course of the summer monitoring bathing season. The amendments that I referred to are providing a live update. So at the time of drafting, there were a number of sites that still had warnings in place. And so we've just updated that so that this is kind of as current as possible. And that's reflected at 2 sites, or 1 site, sorry, where there's a greater than, where we've still got a warning in place. So this just describes the level of cyanobacteria that was covering the bed at the time the health warning was put in place, the number of days that the alert was active over the summer bathing season, and conversion of that to a proportion of the bathing season that was under alert. And then we'll try and just step through these reasonably quickly, but these provide some images of the growing season. So from December, January, February observations that were made, some sort of representative images from the Yaparima and Thornbury in this instance. And what you can see is the bed of the river either viewed through the bathoscope that we make observations of percentage cover, or in the 4th photo, rocks sitting in a tray that are about to be sampled for quantitative assessment of periphyton biomass. So I'll step through these now. This is the Hamilton Burn, and then into the Oreti catchment, the Oreti at 3 Kings. So this is right up the top, near the top of the catchment. Branksholme, Waiau catchment, Sunnyside, noting the dominance of Didymo in the Waiau catchment, Clifton Bridge vicinity, and Tuatapere, and then over to the Untitled catchment, starting at Piano Flat, Waikaka Stream, Waimea Stream, Tara River, Tara Island Bridge. And then I've also got here a link, and we'll see if this will let us show a video from the Aparima catchment. The link will be available for subsequent exploration. This was a little piece of work that we did late last summer to assess the level of periphyton growth at a range of locations towards the end of summer. Nguyen, if you could take us just down the page towards the Otautau stream at Tuatapere in the first instance, but there's an introduction video that's available to watch. I won't subject you to that here, but watch it in English. But if you go down a bit further, Nguyen, and just you can see a map shows all the locations, and so we set out to visit a sort of range of locations that aren't part of our routine monitoring program. But to put it in context, we did this towards the end of summer, following observations at Thornbury of relatively high, probably approaching maximum biomass after a prolonged period of dry weather. So yeah, if we can play that one, please. Yeah, we can probably stop at this point. Yeah, so I mean, there's 4.5, almost 5 minutes of video there. I think you can probably watch them in your own time. Just to illustrate, I guess, that it was pleasing to see the kura persisting in that environment, heavily degraded by fine sediment, and he still there. I mean, interestingly, the tributaries are named Waikura, for example, and so I guess, you know, an illustration of the presence of those within those systems. But I think that concludes the presentation. So.
Again, Lloyd was first.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Didymo, and because that that was pretty massive infestation in the summer, and I'm guessing it's just continuing to spread. Isn't that eventually going to swamp all your other sort of stuff, or is it sort of reached a bit of an equilibrium?
Sure. So, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Esler, we've seen Didymo become probably the dominant species of algae in the Waiau River system, including the Microbial tributary and a number of other tributaries of the lake. We have, since I think 2006, when its incursion was first detected, observed its presence in a number of other rivers around Southland, but not its dominance, and that is likely due to a combination of the flow regime within the Waiau being regulated and providing a fairly stable environment, as well as being relatively low in nutrient status, and so favouring the dominance of that species. In the very recent couple of years, we have observed intermittent, occasions where Cyanobacteria has become established and has had a stronghold, and we've seen some human health warnings in place for parts of the Waiau River, but we haven't seen a sort of increase in the regional extent of Didymo, and I don't think we would anticipate seeing sort of widespread Didymo blooms in our other mainstem rivers, short of there being large changes to the flow regimes that perhaps would support its establishment of dominance.
Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So my question relates to, our water and land plan, our 2018, where you talked about the passes and the fails, and then the national bottom line.
Yes.
And so only one site failed the national bottom line, which is your 200 milligrams per square metre. Yet that same site, which is the Hamilton Burn and Affleck Road, didn't fail our water plan sites. So how is that they failed the national bottom line but haven't failed air plan, yet so many sites failed air plan but didn't fail the national bottom line?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll make a couple of comments on that. So, in regards to the national bottom line, I guess the observation this summer was for sort of one single observation being above that national bottom line, not necessarily a grading of the entire site as being below the national bottom line, because the grading of the sites requires the use of multi-years of data, and owing to the timing of the laboratory results, we don't have the entire summer record to provide us with that sort of up to now, if that makes sense. So we could do that sort of assessment at the end of the hydrological year, once we've got the data that provides that. In terms of the discrepancy between the biomass and the percentage cover, this is something that's, I guess, a complexity that's owing to the species that are present and the not necessarily extensive cover, but very high chlorophyll content of the algal species that are dominating the community at the time that observation is made. So the thick mat cover of 38% and the long filamentous over the summer of 22, we below those water plan thresholds for this summer, but there was one observation over the summer that had a benthic biomass above the density of chlorophyll per square metre that is defined by the national bottom line.
So if you marked up of the watering sites, how are those sites held in relation to the 200 measurement, 200 milligrams per metre squared? How are our sites looking?
Yeah, so I haven't reported that in this item, but indicated that we would provide a follow-up item once a piece of national work that MFE has commissioned to review periphyte and nutrient relationships nationally is completed, and we anticipate that before the end of this financial year, and would would be able to provide a synthesis of that, I guess, in that report. That would be helpful.
Just getting us understanding the nature of how things are monitored or recorded nationally, and then what we do. And so, are we an outlier, or are we more thorough?
Yeah, I think we were one of we're probably the second council to adopt sort of monthly monitoring of periphyton. I think we've been pretty thorough in that regard. Looking at 30 sites, and those have all been contributed to that national data set, which provides. Through any of these, we will provide the most comprehensive and recent update on the drivers of periphyton, incorporating all the data. I think there's over 200 sites now that are able to be included when combined from all regions. But we have one of the larger networks of other regions. In 2018, we did publish an initial assessment of the state of periphyton, and that can be included a reference in the follow-up item on freshwater ecosystem health.
David. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Roger, just excuse my ignorance of periphyton, but river flow, hot summer, and lack of shade, is that all bearings on the amount of periphyton in rivers, or?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, there's a range of factors, including river flow, water temperature, light availability, that control the growth of algae in the river, as they equally control the growth of other plants on the land surface. So yes, I guess all of those factors do influence the growth.
I've just noticed the Waimea stream this year has been extremely low.
Yes.
And a lot of periphyton. The other thing is the Ministry of Environment commissioned a national study. Are you expecting anything riveting out of that, or is it?
Yes, again, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, that was the same study that I referred to in response to Councillor Beard, and we are expecting an updated, sort of set of criteria that could be used to inform the management of periphyton. Yes.
So that's more in looking at the management side, not so much research side.
Well, it looks at the relationships between periphyton biomass in the river and the drivers, and uses those relationships to define tables that can be used to inform the setting of nutrient criteria that are informed by the other factors that you referred to through the river classifications.
Yeah, Lloyd?
Just have one more. You haven't seen any otters?
Yeah.
The reason I ask is I collect otter sightings on Upper 15 from mostly from the Upper Clifton Bridge area. And so if you are out and you see something that looks like an otter, there aren't any otters, but I'm just interested in the sighting.
Sure, yeah. I'll just respond quickly through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. We're more than happy to ask our field staff to do that, and add that over this summer we have kind of undertaken a pilot study using eDNA monitoring method, which included a site on the lower Aparima River in the vicinity of Thornbury, and I guess if otters were present, I would anticipate their DNA being detected through that.
That's wonderful, thank you.
People are pretty adamant.
I have a question. When things get here by accident, and sometimes even by design, we don't bring in natural, I guess the word is, enemies or predation factors or anything else, and as someone that's busy releasing biocontrols of broom and dung beetles in one of my operations, is there anything in that Demosphenium area internationally that we should be looking at to say as a natural control?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, to the best of my knowledge, there has been some kind of consideration of how Didymo may be managed, and some of the things that were identified were the use of salt, for example. However, the use of salt at the sort of concentrations that would effectively remove Didymo would be deleterious to the entire aquatic ecosystem, and so they haven't been pursued as a result. But there are ongoing sort of research efforts to identify opportunities for harvesting and using Didymo to create other products or commodities. So there may be some emerging
I
opportunities.
was thinking more in the line of snails or macrophytes or something that would consume it.
Yeah, so again, through you, Mr. Chair, the periphyton community is the sort of foundation for the aquatic food web, and does provide food to invertebrates that are sort of fit into the grazer category, or their feeding trait is of grazing, and they do have some ability to control that, but when growths get to the sort of nuisance levels, the growth rates greatly outweigh the consumption, and start to modify habitat to the extent that some invertebrate species no longer can kind of persist in that environment.
Well, thank you for that. No further questions. Would someone like to move the recommendation that the report be noted? Thank you, David. Seconded, Nicole? Yep. I'll put the motion. Those in favour would say aye. Aye. Against, no. That's agreed. Let's look at the work programme on page 41, item 7. And Rachel is, yep. Can you beam in again, Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular update on the group work program, and as you'll recall, it also identifies matters of both national and regional interest. And that's quite a moving space. So, for example, there's a bit of discussion here on the National Adaption Plan, which you're workshopping on Tuesday, and we've been advised that the emissions reduction plan will be made available on Monday. So it will be quite nice timing. We'll be able to bring that into the conversation at the workshop on Tuesday. Just for your information, there's a special parliamentary debate on climate change this Thursday or tomorrow, which you may already be aware of. Another matter that's moved since the original papers were put together was the intensive winter grazing update. I don't know, Lucy, would you like to speak to that one?
Sure, thank you, Rachel. So just on your page 43, it mentions the intensive winter grazing report and recommendations that we were expecting a cabinet decision on, and we've had that decision now. So we did a separate, sent an email at least to you all in terms of, and Rob touched on it in his CE's update at the council meeting. So yeah, we've got the updated NES now. So just.
Thank you. Anything else, Rachel?
No,
Thanks.
just happy to open up for questions.
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Rachel, I just see down here we've got number 4, economic model. It said the model has been extensively used in the next phase of policy development. What sort of interactions, because the council's put a lot of energy and resource into this economic model, what interactions will the council or councillors have with this model in the near future?
I'm happy to take that one, Rachel, if you'd like me to. Through you, Chair, just in answer to that question, we'll be intending to workshop with you in part of the regional forum package. They've obviously used it a lot, so we want to be looking forward to the plan change with you but as the recommendations come your way, to look at what they've seen, how their model's been used already, and then what more you might want us to use it for, and to test various assumptions and preferences that you've got for the plan change policy development to come. So you'll see more just in the next couple of months, and then staff will continue to work with it in order to frame up what your policy direction will be for the plan change.
Very good. So it'll be used in that time to inform our decision.
Absolutely.
Making.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lloyd, McCall.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually through you to the Chair, Nicole, whether he wanted to comment on the resource management reform or even into the local government, since he was away in Wellington last week. I just wondered whether there's anything you could tell us around that.
Good thinking.
Happy to make a few comments, and well, I think everybody agrees that the RMA is well overdue for reform. and consistency, etc., efficiency, are the buzzwords that most people would agree with. Some of the fine print is giving a bit of consternation, and the comment was made that if you think the Three Waters was big, this is going to be bigger. One of the particular concerns I have at the moment is they talk about joint committees. It's not totally clear if they were joint committees, and they're talking about one rep from each of the territorials, one only from the regional council, one from iwi. If it's an oversight role, that's fine, but the questions are, if we go through a process and that is the committee making the decisions, and my question was, we've got statutory responsibilities, if there's only one rep, potentially you could be outvoted, and so you could put through your setting process, and other members would say, no, that's too harsh, we'll be doing it. So I know it's early stages, but there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. Government are quite adamant they're going to pursue this at speed, but there are some concerns around that. I mean, I think we all would like to see some of the inconsistencies in the RMA fixed, but speed, it could get the speed wobbles, as we've seen with other things in the past. So we're watching the space, I guess, quite closely, and there is a group that are working quite closely with the ministries. So it's still it's an evolving picture, but I expect.
Do we know when a draft of what their expectations are will be made public?
So far it's been pretty high level. Lucy probably can comment better on this than I can. There's probably some input going in from staff, but it's the old story, the devil's in the detail, but we've got a government that is very focused on structures and centralisation, regionalisation. We just don't want to lose the local contribution. I mean, when the grazing was raised a moment ago, and again I was quite disappointed that actually we didn't get prior notice, having worked closely with the government, and those recommendations have been sitting on the table for probably 2 years. Federated Farmers had an embargoed release the day before. The regional sector didn't get it till Friday night. So the publicity was out there with everybody else claiming responsibility, and we as a council have worked really hard with a group of people to come up with solutions to actually help the government out. And that was disappointing that there was no acknowledgement or in that sector. The other has been the Three Waters, where changes to the governance. Again, it has been put out, and there was a small group that gave us very good information that improved the governance structure. But again, it was the point I made in Wellington the other day, was if we're going to work in partnership, surely you actually respect and give acknowledgement to your partners.
Cool. Any other questions? Yes, Lloyd?
Just a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman, really. Under the Transport Management on 5, in that blue section on page 45, I picked up a comment in one of their meetings. They were looking for more effluent dump sites around Southland. I don't know whether we have any work streams on that, any plans or not, but you may want to follow up through Russell to just find
We
out.
identified some places where there is a need.
I think this was the question. There was a generic comment made at our last transport meeting, and I'm aware of the infrastructure of Southland and the main streams, and I'm also aware of the companies' interactions between each other, because what you see and what is actually real is a little bit different. So we've really only got about 2, maybe 3 major transport agencies, and they work within themselves. So I'm not too sure whether we actually need physically more, or whether they need to be open.
One of the obvious ones to me is that road to Tiana, where the cows will go up for the winter, and you get the green line going up Gorge Hill.
Yep. So I just raised to follow up that one. The other one was down in current initiatives. Under the first one there, transport and recycling consultation document. I have a personal view that we as Southland don't do this very well, and we end up doing a great job at the door, and the same truck picks it up and takes it to the same landfill. And I wonder whether we need to be a little bit smarter on that, and it should be a national collective, so I'm just wondering in their feedback whether we can make sure that we're actually looking at that in a better, wider light. And I just make a comment down on page 49, there's a climate change and adaptation bill section there. There seems to be, and this is my personal view, I think, a climate change has been blamed for everything, but tectonic plate movement and climate change, I just wonder whether the relationship is as strong as what has been stated by many. So I'm not trying to undermine it, but we need to clarify just what is happening in different parts.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just also want to pick up on the draft National Adaptation Plan for Managed Retreat. Would that be a good meaty topic for the newly formed subcommittee to get their teeth into, to go through that and come up with some mission points?
Good question. All right. Anybody else on the work plan? Oh, Robert, did we miss you? Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I was just asking a question of Rachel. I put it in the chat, but Rachel, do you know whether the debate on James Shaw's climate budget will be televised? Are we able to watch, as we are a lot of other debates, but it's a pre-budget debate, so I'm just not sure.
So I can't answer that one, Councillor Guyton, right at the moment, but I will follow up and let you know as soon as possible so that if it is televised, you can watch that.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that would probably be a very good one for all councillors to watch, really, to get the feeling for the various political streams of thought around that, because it is very important to us. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Parliament, when it's sitting, is live streamed. So you'll be able to watch it either if you have a terrestrial television and you want to watch it on Parliament TV, we should be able to see it online.
Yeah. Okay, there's your answer, Robert.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the work stream? Hello. Oh, Lyndall, yes, we've got you. Oh, scary.
Sorry, thanks, Chairman. I was just going to say it's probably on Parliament TV because it's riveting and not examples of bad behaviour at all. And I was going to comment on the fact that recycling consultation closed on the 8th of May, but it's no less important for us. So, Rachel, Lucy, is there some other way that we can, apart from the climate change subcommittee, we can have those conversations, because I think we still need to. Great South could be included in that conversation.
Comment, Lucy?
Happy to take it up with Rachel and we can figure out a way forward from there.
Cool. Yeah, Janelle?
I can, through you, Chair, probably just add a comment to that. So the consultation package really covered things that impact the TAs more than us, but I think waste generally comes through a number of other streams of our work, including climate change, so definitely be a key part of that process as well.
Thank you. Right, if there's no further comments, or
I asked it last time, under the transport management, so I guess Lloyd and I are a bit involved in transport management. On page 46, it kind of suggests we've basically finished all our work. I don't think it's probably the case.
Big stuff coming.
So there are ongoing things, and I'm sure Russell might want to clarify what he is working on. If he's not, then maybe, yeah.
So you're suggesting we get a Russell report for our next one?
I'd like to think what's up. There are
that's a fair comment.
There is one coming.
Yeah, one coming. We'll deal with it. Thank you. So would someone like to move the recommendation that the work program be noted?
Okay.
Thank you, Lloyd. Seconded, Alan. The motion, those in favour would say aye. Aye. Against, no, that's agreed. That concludes the items for discussion. We've got some publicly excluded. Oh, there's no extraordinary urgent business? No. So, Michaela, have you got a reason why we might need to go into publicly excluded?
Yep, so we're going into public excluded to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, and also to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage.
Thank you for that. Have we got a motion that we go into publicly excluded?
You have to move,
Peter and Nicole. I'll put the motion. Those in favour